Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm your host, Mick Sweetman.
And I'm your co-host, Jesse Woodward.
And this is CHLY's new weekly current affairs show. We'll be working to bring you some of the conversations from around the CHLY to you on Saturdays between 9 and 10 a.m.
This week marks the 1-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, Mick starts off the show with a conversation with City of Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog on what the city is planning in terms of recovery.
We also speak with Julie Chadwick from the Discourse on her investigation into the state of rental housing in Nanaimo, as well as with Attorney General David Eby on Bill 7, which freezes rent for the rest of the year and regulates rent evictions.
Wrapping up the show, Joe Pugh brings us part 1 of a feature with Vancouver band The Fugitives. He interviews band member Brendan MacLeod on their album Trench Songs and the protest music of World War I soldiers in the field. But first, Mick's interview with Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog.
Good morning. Today we are speaking with the Mayor of Nanaimo, Leonard Krog, to talk about the state of the local economy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Delighted to be on.
Yeah, so how did you see the pandemic impacting people here in Nanaimo?
Well, certainly from the city's perspective right away, we knew we had to react. There were layoff notices issued in accordance with the collective agreement, and then significant changes in terms of placing people in positions they hadn't had before in order to try and keep the impact on our staff to a minimum, and that worked a lot over time. But of course, there were long-term impacts, particularly around recreation programs, and those echo until today.
Now, another thing that the City Council did this year is you adopted something called the donut economy as a kind of an economic model. Can you tell people what that is and how that's going to help the city?
Well, it's been the subject of much discussion, and I would suggest much misunderstanding. The donut model is essentially a recognition that I think is shared by the majority of humanity that we live on a finite planet. We have finite resources, and if we exceed that, we damage the planet, whether it's through increased global temperatures, through all sorts of, through famine, through pestilence, through all these things that exceed our ecological limit. The donut model recognizes that we live within an ecological limit. But it also recognizes that in order to be healthy communities, there should be basic standards. People should not fall below. They should have access to honest and transparent government. They should have access to food and to shelter and to healthcare and to education, that we should live in an equitable society. But in doing this, it's not saying you have to do this or you have to do that. It's really what you will call a concept, more global in nature than local. And you can't do everything at a municipal level, and that's not the point of it. It is to give us and encourage us to have measures in place that say whether we're building a better community, and a community that respects the environment, that tries to deal with its waste, that tries to recycle, that tries to decrease our collective carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. That's what the donut model is. It doesn't mean we're going to stop delivering services, doesn't mean we're going to raise your taxes, doesn't mean we're going to stop building roads or bike lanes or anything of that nature. It means that we're going to try and put in place and recognize what we've already been doing, but not calling it that. Try and put in place measures that tell us if we're in fact building the better community that the strategic plan of the city promotes, which is around livability, environment, economic health, the 4 pillars that are set out in our strategic plan.
I'm glad I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned livability, because in the State of the Nanaimo Economy report that just came out, it actually noted that housing prices for a single family home in Nanaimo went up 9.7% in 2020, and rent increased by 7%. So what can be done to make living here more affordable?
Well, I mean, the obvious things are, and some of it's already in place, I mean, and give credit to previous councils, something in the range of 60% of new single-family dwellings in this community have a secondary suite in them. And that's a result of policy and that instituted by previous councils. So that is ongoing. You rarely see a house now built in Nanaimo that doesn't have a secondary suite, which therefore provides accommodation. We have certainly, I won't say gone out and dragged developers in the community and said, look, we're a place to build. The fact is they've discovered us because our land prices, relatively speaking, were modest and compared to, say, the Lower Mainland, and plus people want to live here. We don't have control over rent. I mean, your listeners know that. That's the residential tenancy branch. That's the provincial government. We don't have control over income tax. We don't build public housing. We don't have the resources as a municipality to do that, and never have, or the jurisdiction. And that's true across this country. So we work to encourage the provincial government to provide supportive and affordable housing where they can in Nanaimo, and a lot of that is underway already.
So you touched on this earlier in our conversation around like housing being a provincial area of responsibility. Obviously, yes. Nanaimo, like many other communities across Canada, is still grappling with a lot of homelessness, a lot of visible homelessness and encampments. What else do you think needs to be done to really address that issue?
Well, firstly, I don't like to, and don't take this as a slap or criticism to you, I don't like to talk about the homelessness crisis so much as I want to talk about the mental health addictions and acquired brain injury crisis, which is part of our larger homelessness crisis. We are in a difficult time in terms of housing affordability. There's no question about it. We went for several decades without many rental units being built in this province. We were a desirable place to live. We saw the abandonment by the federal government of the National Housing Strategy. That's had a real impact on housing and affordability. But the thing that is uppermost in people's minds, it's not folks who are only quote unquote homeless. In other words, literally who do not have the financial wherewithal to pay for or acquire accommodation, and that accommodation isn't available for them anyway. The folks who are living in the worst circumstances and frankly creating the most social havoc and disorder in our streets are those that suffer with the mental health addictions and acquired brain injuries. It's not everybody. It's a portion of the homeless population, and that is most definitely where the province has to step up to the plate. And in fairness, I think they are. I think the penny has dropped. I didn't see much happen during the term of the government previously. The previous government to that, the BC Liberals, didn't do as much as they could have or should have. And indeed, for 3 or 4 decades, we have put people on the streets who frankly never should have been there in the first place, or alternatively not had facilities available for people who ended up on the streets who should have had accommodation in safe, secure facilities. So, but that's the crux of the problem. It's not just about homelessness. If it was just homelessness, you know what? Government raises assistance rates, provides more subsidies, the private sector would build the housing, etc. It's more than that. It is the health addictions aspect of this that is the tough part, and the one that draws the most, frankly, community criticism and abuse and frustration and fear, anguish, anger, you name it.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that in the past, you thought that there could be a stronger way to kind of get people into this care.
Absolutely. Look, I got a certain amount of criticism for what I'll call it the BC civil liberties, that end of the community. But I'm not backing down on what I have said over and over again, and which the Premier's mandate letters to his own ministers recognize, what the BC Urban Mayors Caucus, our 4 requests of government recognize, and that is that the complex cases require complex care. Might that care be in fact secure, like previous institutions of the old? Yes. Do I want great big ones? No. Do I want smaller community facilities such as the BC Urban Mayors are asking for? Absolutely. And indeed even smaller facilities than that, where people are truly integrated in the community. But there are some folks, without question, who are incapable of surviving on their own. When you have a senior citizen with severe dementia, we have no trouble placing them in secure facilities where they're housed and cared for and medicated appropriately and fed and looked after and are safe. Why is it any different for someone who has a severe mental health addiction issue, acquired brain injury, who wanders the streets screaming and yelling at various people, and all they can think about is getting their next fix and stealing unrepentantly, without any conscience, so to speak, anything they can to feed that horrible addiction. I mean, with great respect, I think it's inhumane, because essentially what we're doing, and I've said this before, when you sit back as a society and refuse to deliver the services and the continuum of care that's necessary, you might as well call it a death sentence, because you're just leaving people out in the streets until they die either through overdose or violence because they've upset somebody who's more violent and stronger than them, or whatever. I can't tell you how many people, parents in particular, have written to me, emailed me, or phoned, whatever the case may be, since I started speaking out in this, saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, I support what you have to say. Every day we're waiting to hear that, their son, their daughter, whoever is dead somewhere. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's a 21st century freaking democracy. We are a wealthy country by any standard, and we found literally, if you look at the federal deficit, hundreds of billions of dollars to deal with COVID. So let's, for heaven's sakes, deal with what has been an ongoing serious issue for the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Thank you for addressing that. I think it's, talking about these issues is important. It's part of our city.
Yes.
But how do you see Nanaimo kind of, and like just as a city as a whole, moving into 2021? Like, what do you see on the agenda for us this year?
What do I see happening? I think you'll see a continued steady hand by local council. We have worked hard as a council to keep this city out of the headlines the way it was getting headlines previously. You're going to see also, and are in the midst of, the most significant review of our official community plan for well over a decade. This is, we've called it the Reimagine Nanaimo process. That goes back to the days of Joy Leach as mayor, when she had Imagine Nanaimo, which was the great review of our official community plan. Now, there's enormous consultation, some recommendations. There's a number of projects we're working on with Nanaimo First Nation as well. So I think you'll see a fairly active year, all things considered.
Thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure. Keep well. Cheers.
Mick Sweetman speaking of Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog on the impact of COVID-19 on Nanaimo and the city's plan for the future. You're listening to Midcoast Morning on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. I'm Jesse Woodward. If you would like to support Midcoast Morning, make a donation at chly.ca/donate. Up next, Mick's interview of Julie Chadwick of The Discourse. But first, a song. This is Great Green Eyes by Montreal artist Beyries.
You are there, bright as sunlight, standing still with your arms wrapped around a guitar. I can't find the words. I can't find the words. Big black hat that you wear to hide, great green eyes, soft as grass in the morning. I can't find the words. I can't find the words. I can't find the words. I can't find the words.
The cost of renting in Nanaimo jumped by 7% in 2020, according to a recent State of the Economy report by the city of Nanaimo. One of Nanaimo's longtime reporters, Julie Chadwick, who's now reporting on the city for the Discourse, has been investigating the impact of the rising cost of housing in a series called Making Rent. Hi, we're joined here today with Julie Chadwick, reporter for the Discourse in Nanaimo. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Can you tell us just a bit about your new investigation into making rent in Nanaimo?
Yeah, so part of how the Discourse works is that we kind of take it to the community. We do community engagement journalism. So one thing that we did was we said to people, like, what kind of issues do you want us to cover? And one of the things that we had kind of discussed among ourselves was basically the rental crisis that's happening in BC, but also particularly in Nanaimo. And for me, I had been moving house quite a few times. I just had gone through a period in my life where I moved several times within a couple of years. And it was right around 2015, 2016, 2017, right in there. I just noticed like a huge jump in rental prices. I'd say right around 2016, it was like in a period of a year, it seemed like everything just went up by $500. And this is just my personal experience, and it's the experience of loads of people. And so just having looked at the listings so consistently for a while and noticing that, it was something that it was just on my mind, like, just something that I had experienced as a renter. And so I just said, like, hey, why don't we do an investigation into this?
What were some of the things that people told you when you're talking to them as part of this story?
Yeah, so like I said, like with the community engagement part, we take it to the readers, we take it to the residents of Nanaimo, and really ask them, what is the situation? So we did another survey specifically for renters and another one for landlords, and we got a lot of responses. And so when going through those, it really was clearly a crisis for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, factors like having an animal or having kids, even prior to there being such a bad vacancy rate, like it's about 1% right now. I myself had experiences with having people saying, oh, I don't think this is appropriate for you, because I have 2 kids. I have 3 now, but at the time I had 2. Oh, I don't think you'll like this place, like that kind of thing. So one woman I talked to, Megan Strom, she said she has 4 kids. She has a dog, and she's a single mom. And she said, like, all they hear is single mom and 4 kids. No. And 2 of her kids are grown and are working, and she has a good income. She's a 4th year university student. Like she can afford the rent and stuff, but she couldn't even look at places. Like she called 30 places and she could only view like 2 or 3 of them. And I actually asked her, what kind of prices she's looking at. She was at the place that she'd been in for 6 years, and she's paying $1,200 for a whole house, and had done a lot of renos in the house herself. Like a lot of time you have tenants that are really contributing to their houses, and then you have situations where the housing market is just so hot that a lot of landlords are deciding to put houses on the market. So that's one factor that's really adding to the problem that we found out, was just housing prices going up so much is really an incentive. And it's, it's understandable. Like if you can make a lot of money on your house right now and you were thinking of selling anyway, or, we're mulling it over or something, like now really is the time. Like there's a lot of demand, there's not a lot of supply. So yeah, a lot of people just getting evicted for that. It's kind of like in such a tight rental market, any factor can work against you, right? So it doesn't matter that she necessarily like had a really good reference and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like, oh, I've got you, the single mom with kids, or I've got this like quiet student or whatever, right? And it's like it's just so competitive,
right? I think even in your story you mentioned, you talked to a landlord who said that there was a bidding war on the unit that they were renting.
Yeah, so that was one of the landlords. When she was telling me, the places I'm looking at are like twice what I'm paying now or more. Like some places were, $3,000 a month. So I just said, oh, like, show me some of the listings. So she sent me some of the listings. And like, it's true. Yeah. Like $2,500 like is pretty normal for a 3-bedroom place right now, or even sometimes a 2-bedroom. Yeah. And I called one of the landlords, and he didn't necessarily want to be named, but he said, you know, that he had put his place out there for, I think it was somewhere in the range of 2,500, and he had people offering him more than $3,000 for it. Like, and he didn't even accept it. He was just kind of like, whoa. He said, you know, I got like 100 calls right away. And he said, I felt bad for people. It was like, you know, I knew that I was only going to pick one person. I was going to have 99 other people that were disappointed.
How much are people spending on rent in Nanaimo? Like how much of their income do they have to spend on rent to have a place to live?
So there is this kind of benchmark affordable rate of like 30% of their income. So that's kind of the upper end of what people, like the maximum that people should pay. So people are paying way more. Some of the data we looked at showed that I think it was half of the renters approximately were paying like 50% or more. But what's really interesting is when you break it out for income levels. So we, like, when you look at the upper income levels of people in Nanaimo, they're paying like 16% on average. But then when you go to the poorest section of people in Nanaimo, people I think is in the range of like making $12,000 or so a year. They're often paying like more than 70% of their income on rent. So yeah, I mean, we have a really unsustainable situation. Like one expert I talked to, Patrick Condon, he was saying, you know, like in Vancouver, they have like a fairly high level of non-market housing, like higher than you would think, considering that Vancouver is quite unaffordable. So they have like about 15%, he was saying. And a lot of that is co-op housing. And he said, you know, like that's not even just focused particularly on, say, like supportive housing or for like the absolute lowest income or for homelessness. That's actually kind of like cheap middle class housing. And he said like the reason why that's important, in addition to taking care of like, you know, the very, very precariously housed or homeless, is that people in their 30s and 40s are really contributing a lot to the economy. You know, you're really kind of in your highest earning potential. You have kids, you're spending money on courses for the kids, all kinds of stuff, right? And so you really want to keep those people in your community and keep them comfortable, because like everybody benefits, you know, it's a whole picture kind of a thing. So that's one of the things with the second story that we were kind of getting into, was what's often called like the missing middle, in that we're sort of looking at the whole range of renters, but also just kind of looking at like people. In the first story, we talked to this woman, Sarah, who I thought her story was really interesting because she's actually making really good money. She said, you know, she's making more than $30 an hour, and she runs a successful marketing firm, and she's really struggling. Like, she managed to find a place, but when her and her husband split up, it took a little while for her to get off the mortgage, and she was looking for a place, and she found one condo that she could afford, and then couldn't buy it because she was still like, you know, with COVID and stuff, like she couldn't get her off the mortgage and the banking was complicated. And so that place sold, and then she saw it come up on the market again. But by the time it come up on the market, it had gone up so much in less than a year that she couldn't afford it anymore. And this is someone who, you know, is making good money. Like, so everybody's struggling. And that's why I wanted to include her story, because it's not just this thing of like, oh, you know, like lower income people have it really hard, which is true. It's that like it's hard for everybody right now. It really hits everyone.
Like, what do you see happening in the future? Like do you see like this will continue to increase, or are we in a bubble now, and like will it pop? Are you able to give any kind of like the personal financial advice?
I think as a journalist, it's not necessarily my place to do that. But what I'm hoping to do with the stories is to help people understand what's going on. So situation is really complicated, but it's also in some ways kind of simple. And so I'm hoping to break it down so that people feel more empowered to understand what's happening in their own lives.
If people want to read your story, where can they do that?
So we have a newsletter that we put the stories out to our readers. They often get the story like a day or two before it goes out onto the Discourse website. We share it on social media, on Facebook and Twitter and stuff as well. And I also wanted to mention that we're at a stage now where we're seeking monthly supporters. So if people like so far what they've been seeing, with these different series that we've been doing, and the way that we've been engaging in the community, which I think has been really exciting for me as a reporter, they can sign up to be one of our ongoing supporters. It could be, $5 a month, whatever. And that goes right towards hiring local reporters to be covering these issues. We're trying to get 200 monthly supporters by March 26th. So that would be really great if people wanted to sign up to become monthly supporters. Doesn't cost that much.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your investigation and kind of what's happening with rental housing here in Nanaimo.
Yeah, and thanks for what you guys are doing here with community radio as well.
That was Julie Chadwick, a reporter for The Discourse. You can read her series, Making Rent, on Nanaimo's rental crisis at thediscourse.ca/Nanaimo. You're listening to Midcoast Morning on CHLY. This week, the BC government passed Bill 7, the Tenancy Statutes Amendment Act, which freezes rent increases until the end of the year and regulates the practice of rent evictions. We're speaking with BC's Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing, David Eby. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Okay, so the new Bill 7 freezes rent for a year. Why are you taking that action now as BC's economy is rebounding and vaccinations for COVID-19 are rolling out?
We had already frozen rents through an emergency measure, and our data was indicating to us that the people who are particularly impacted by the pandemic are people who are involved in lower wage jobs. They're often renters, and they are disproportionately women and people of color and who have been really impacted in terms of employment and so on. And so through this particular initiative, our hope is to try to keep costs down for British Columbians as they try to find their feet after the pandemic, supporting renters who are struggling, while at the same time recognizing that it will have an impact on landlords, but hoping that for most landlords, they're able to continue to operate despite the no rent increase. And we do have other measures in place in the bill I'm sure we'll talk about related to landlords.
Right. So one thing that some tenant advocates have criticized in this bill is that it doesn't ban rent evictions, but it regulates them. What's your response to that?
So there's certainly buildings in the province that are incredibly run down, and they're in terms of fixing them up or rebuilding them, it's reasonable to expect that a building owner would want to rebuild or do very significant renovations to them. What this change does is it makes the owner of the property go to the residential tenancy branch and show that they have all their permits and show why they're doing the renovations and what the impacts on the building's longevity will be and the quality of life in the building. And the tenants get to come and make representations about that. And we don't want people to stop doing renovations of buildings. We just want it to be not an excuse to get out of a tenancy agreement where someone has rent that's lower than market because they've been living there for a long time, but they need that rent to be lower than market because they can't afford to live elsewhere. So what we're really trying to do is provide protection to tenants while at the same time giving opportunities for renovations to buildings that are badly needed.
And how does the bill do that? How does it provide that protection for tenants? Like are tenants, do landlords have to let the tenants move back in at the same rent that they had before?
Yeah, good question. So under the old system, a tenant would get an eviction notice that said, we're doing renovations and we need vacant possession of your suite to do it. And then the tenant would take that, as a lot of the tenants in the building might, to the residential tenancy branch and challenge the eviction notice and say, I don't think the unit needs to be empty. I'm not sure that the landlord has the permits yet even, so they can't evict me even before they know if they're going to be able to go ahead with this. And I don't think they're doing substantial enough renovations that they need the place to be empty for any amount of time, and I'm willing to accommodate it anyway, so you don't have to end my tenancy. So what it does now under the new system is instead of the tenant going to make those arguments, it's the landlord that has all the information. whether they have permits, why they're doing the renovation, and so on, that has to go to the residential tenancy branch and get permission, and the tenants have the ability to appear. So first of all, there's that reversal. The second is the requirements and the test that is considered by the arbitrator who's hearing the case is about, are these renovations actually substantial enough that they need the suite to be vacant? But more than that is, even if the tenant's willing to accommodate it and move out, are these such significant renovations that it's not reasonable that the tenancy would continue during the period of the renovations? And so it's a case-by-case measurement, but it does recognize that there are some renovations that take extended periods of time and that require a significant demolition of a suite and so on, that it's not practical to continue a tenancy, but there is a presumption that for the vast majority of renovations that a tenant should be able to return to their suite once the renovation is done.
Okay, so I just getting back to the rent freeze, one thing that tenant groups are criticizing is that it's not vacancy control. So landlords can increase the rent of a vacant unit however high they want to, like as high as the market will bear. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not vacancy control. And one of the big challenges with vacancy control is we're really encouraging people to invest in rental housing, to build new rental housing, and we're partnering with private property owners around redevelopment to deliver affordable rental housing. But we need all kinds of rental housing across the province. And when you put vacancy control in place, it does have the effect of making people extremely reluctant in the private sector to invest in rental housing that we need. And so we're trying to get as much rental housing built as we can, and also putting in place affordability mechanisms. So we've got more than 26,000 buildings, either complete or under construction, with affordable rental in them. And we also have various rent subsidies to support tenants with rising rents. So we're trying to go at it in a way that encourages the construction of new rental housing, but also recognizes that people may need support and that we do need affordable rental housing as well. And so we're building that directly as government.
Right. No, as one of the things your government did during the pandemic, or I guess earlier on in the pandemic, is you implemented a rent supplement that went directly to landlords to help people who had lost their job or had a lower income due to the economic shutdowns or restrictions, let's say. Is this something that you think will be extended in the upcoming budget?
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of the work that our government did, and the previous housing minister and the premier, around prioritizing the needs of renters, because for a long time renters were ignored in this province, and so everything from the rent freeze to the emergency supports for renters, the eviction ban, these were things that didn't happen in other provinces, and if they did, not even close to the same extent. So British Columbia really set the bar in terms of tenant protections. Within the budget, decisions are still being made about priorities and allocation, but renters are always part of the discussion around government programs, how we provide support. And currently, we're doing a full review of our rental supplement program. So within government, we have a number of different programs that top people's incomes up to support them in paying rent, whether through social assistance, disability payments, or a seniors safer grant, or other types of programs. So we're doing a review of those right now in light of the basic income report we received, and so work is ongoing about how we can better support tenants.
Right. Now, what do you say to, like, maybe not the large companies, but the smaller landlords who have like a secondary suite in their house, or maybe they have an extra, like one extra house that they're renting out? The housing market has exploded. Like, housing is just more and more expensive to purchase these days. Is the rent freeze putting an undue onus on the smaller landlords, or how do you have a plan to address that segment of landlords?
Yeah, we certainly recognize that the COVID rent freeze is going to have an impact on landlords and what they may have been expecting to be able to charge for rent. What we're looking to do is really shift to a program that incents landlords to invest in their building, and that connects any rent increase to actual improvements made to the building. So under the old system, you would get you'd be able to increase rent by inflation plus 2%, no matter what the state of your building is or how you were running it. And under the new system, after the rent freeze is over, you'll still be able to increase rent by the level of inflation. But if you want to increase rent beyond inflation, we're going to be putting in place a predictable system for both tenants and landlords to understand that when landlord makes a significant improvement to a building, to a heating system, plumbing, or otherwise to extend the life of a building and to make life better in the building, then they will be able to recover some of that investment through an additional rent increase. So we wanted to recognize that landlords are putting money in their building and they need to be able to recover some of that investment that makes the building last longer and makes life in the building better. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that landlords weren't able to just increase the rent even if they weren't doing that work.
Right. And I just want to shift gears here for a second. Another thing that the province is working on right now is down to Victoria. The province is working on getting the people who are in encampments into emergency housing. This is actually something that was done in Nanaimo a couple of years ago when we had the tent city here in the city. The province built temporary modular housing. It is still in use, but the number of homeless people in Nanaimo actually increased since then. So what makes you think it's going to be any different in Victoria?
Yeah, there were a huge number of people in the province that were hit really hard by COVID, and especially people who were really in sort of precarious housing situations. So, people were couch surfing, or people who may have been staying at different friends' places or staying in emergency shelters or so on, kind of out of view. And what happened with COVID was the restriction of guests and the closure of emergency services, drop-in centers, emergency shelters running at 50%. And so what we've seen is quite a disturbing rise in homelessness in the province as a result of COVID, and significantly a rise in the real visibility of some of these social issues. And so we, like many people in various areas of enterprise in the province, we were making some progress on homelessness. And starting to see those numbers stabilize and come down in a way that they hadn't for a long time, and then COVID, and we've seen those numbers go up. So we'll have more work to do, but the good news is we have literally tens of thousands of units in the pipeline. We have 3,000 in the CRD and Victoria area alone, supportive housing units, affordable housing units that are coming online. We have the federal government online for the first time in a long time in a way that they haven't been before, investing in housing to get people inside, but also in affordable housing. And so I'm quite confident that things are going to look significantly different 18 months from now. But right now we are in the darkest stage without question. And it's not just being frustrated with COVID. It's all of the impacts of COVID really being at their peak right now. And we're just starting to get to the point of turning the corner. So whether it's Nanaimo or Victoria or Vancouver or Grand Forks, it doesn't really matter where in the province. This is an issue faced by municipal councils and the province. So we're happy to be working together on this.
Right. So you mentioned supportive housing. I know there are plans by BC Housing to build more supportive housing here in Nanaimo. However, a lot of the supportive housing seems to be concentrated in the south end of Nanaimo, which is traditionally a working class neighborhood. So why isn't the province spreading out the supportive housing to other areas of the city? Like, why is it being concentrated in an area that is already struggling?
So it's you're right to note that it's certainly something that BC Housing and the province tries to avoid is putting a significant amount of supportive housing in one single location in a city. It can be challenging in terms of land values, where you have a limited amount of funding and you're wanting to get housing done, and you're looking at where land is more affordable and where you can do more units. And also we work closely with municipal partners around identifying appropriate sites and ensuring there's balance in place. So in Victoria, as an example, we as a province and BC Housing really overweighted one particular community where there were a lot of older motels and hotels that we were able to buy quite affordably and move people indoors right away, the Burnside neighborhood. And reasonably, at a certain point, the neighbor said, "Look, we're fine with social housing and supportive housing and all these kinds of things, but everything can't be in our neighborhood for the whole CRD." And I'm not as familiar with the Nanaimo issues around concentration of supportive housing in any particular neighborhood. But I do know that it's something that we work very closely with a local municipality about, and I'm sure that's part of the discussion with Nanaimo. But it can be a function of land affordability and where we can get as many units as possible. But that's not an excuse for focusing attention exclusively on one neighborhood. In my opinion, social and supportive housing needs to be spread across a whole city. And so even as housing minister, I have significant supportive housing development going into my constituency on the west side of the city of Vancouver, because it is important that everybody in the city recognize that we have a role to play in addressing homelessness and supporting people who are in distress.
Okay. What else can tenants expect from you this year, like in terms of helping them out?
Well, we have a couple outstanding recommendations from the Rental Housing Task Force that haven't been implemented yet. There's about 4 more recommendations that we're doing work on right now. There's additional work happening at the residential tenancy branch around how those hearings happen and making sure that tenants and landlords are supported with things like the hearings being recorded, so that they're able to review the hearing after it happened and go to court to appeal if necessary. And we've got, hopefully, we shall see what the finance minister and the premier do in the budget, but I do hope that housing will continue to be a strong focus of our government as we've committed to in the platform, and that we'll have more to say in the coming weeks and months ahead about how we're supporting cities with affordable housing, and not just housing for people who are homeless, but also housing for the people who help make cities go in the province, and workforce housing that is affordable to folks who are working at lower wage levels, because that missing middle is really important, and it's something that hasn't been addressed, and so I'm hopeful we'll have more to say about that.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much for your time, Minister.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
Okay, have a good day.
You're listening to Midcoast Morning on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. I'm Jesse Woodward. Wrapping up the show today is a feature from Joe Pugh with his interview with Brendan McLeod of Vancouver band The Fugitives.
The past is theory. So said my theater history prof in university. The idea was that as much as we can study the past and draw evidence-based conclusions on what life was like, we're always a bit removed. One of the most fascinating things about history for me is that it's really the story of people. When you truly connect with something from the past, it's usually because you find a way to connect with someone from a completely different time, place, and set of circumstances. For a fleeting moment, it seems like the past is no longer theory. It comes to life. Enter Vancouver folk band The Fugitives. Their most recent album, Trench Songs, brings the stories of Canadian First World War soldiers to life. They took traditional lyrics and created original, contemporary melodies. As a result, the lyrics from more than 100 years ago sound like they're living and breathing in today's world. I spoke to Brendan McLeod from the band. We discussed 2 songs in particular that capture the spirit of the album. Before we got into specifics, though, he outlined a bit about the inspiration behind Trench Songs.
The whole premise of the project is just kind of like that. Peter Jackson had that movie of They Shall Not Grow Old.
It's a documentary from 2018. It took real First World War footage from the trenches and modernized it. If you've ever seen 100-year-old film, you know that it's herky-jerky. People don't move like they do in real life. It's also typically very grainy and warped. The Peter Jackson film fixed this using computer technology to add in missing frames, digitally restoring the film and colorizing it. Why go through all of this?
They tried to more vividly represent the memories of soldiers as if they were humans without all of these weird artifices of the past.
The result? The real footage of real soldiers in the trenches looks and feels like it could have been shot today. It's truly staggering and worth seeking out if you haven't seen it. Trench Songs by The Fugitives is kind of like the musical equivalent of that film. According to Brendan, listening to 100-year-old songs kind of has the same distance as watching the grainy film, and not because of the words.
What happens when you start listening to the old songs is all of a sudden the lyrics are really distanced because you hear this old, you hear just the old equipment and the arrangements are an older style, and there's nothing wrong with that style, it just puts it in a certain place. And so we were like, it would be cooler to just kind of put the listener in a more contemporary place and they can just kind of hear those emotions as if someone would relay them now.
So what are the songs? Well, there's a mix. It turned out there was a bit of a hidden secret concept within the concept album.
Which you're not supposed to hear when you hear the album, but just to ground us, we just kind of did imagine it was like people, like what they would sing in the course of one night together. We didn't have a drinking song, so we went and kind of cobbled one together, and didn't have like another moment, and we went and found a song for that. So we were really kind of looking for specific emotional, like emotional arcs.
I want to touch on two of the songs and the emotional arcs behind them in more detail. One focuses a bit on the communal, universal aspects of soldiering, and one that feels more personal. The first, Hanging on the Old Barbed Wire, is a traditional tune with a theme we can all relate to: complaining about your boss. There are actually a few versions of this one already out there. Irish group Chumbawamba, you know, the tub-thumping band, they recorded a version that sounds very traditional.
If you want to find the general, I know where he is. I know where he is. I know where he is.
I was wondering if the band had listened to that version or any others.
We tried to stay away from hearing too many old versions of it. We tried to really stay more in tune with the text. Like, this comes out of a theater project and kind of a writing project that I've been working on. So it was mainly a text-based thing. Like, it was a monologue first, and then I started getting really into World War I soldier songs and bringing it to the band. But we weren't in it originally for the melodies, we were in it for the words.
So what are those words about? My first interpretation of the song was that it's about a truism my grandmother told me when I was young. It's always the old, rich, powerful men that make the wars, and the young, poor ones that die in them. That's definitely a theme in the song, but as Brendan points out, the tune is maybe more interesting because of what it can tell us about the soldiers who sung it.
There's like a lot of jingoistic songs, but for most of my research, the songs that they would sing together in trenches, and that's what we were going for, is trench songs, weren't those kind of songs. They would actually usually take patriotic songs and make fun of them, and they had a really dark humor to them, and they largely made fun of their superiors. And so I think one part of that is that anyone in that situation would make fun of your superior. It's just kind of like a very natural thing. And I think there's also like that would happen even if you weren't in the trenches. Like if you just worked any job and you're like, I hate the boss, who doesn't hate the boss? But there's also another element of just the harrowing nature of the circumstances they're in, and this feeling that there was no solidarity from some of the people in power, and that it was really falling on them. So yeah, I think all of that stuff is in there, and I'm sure it meant different things to different people as they sang it differently through the war.
Through the song, we get a look into the mindset of the soldiers in the face of this horror they were living through. And it's not that different from you or me, at work, complaining about our jobs. Except instead of answering emails on weekends, they were dealing with being gored and blown to pieces. And in spite of that, or maybe because of it, they still had the gumption to sing. Here's the Fugitives version of Hanging on the Old Barbed Wire.
I saw him, I saw him. I saw him, I saw him. I saw him, I saw him. If you want to find the general, I know where he is. The medal on his chest. I saw him, I saw him. Another medal on his chest. If you want to find the colonel, I know where he is. Sitting there, stuffing his gut. I saw him, I saw him. Sitting there, stuffing his gut. I saw him, I saw him. I saw him, I saw him. I saw him, I saw him. Sitting there stuffing his gut. You wanna find politicians, I know where they are. Drinking brandy at the bar. I saw them, I saw them. Drinking brandy at the bar. I saw them, I saw them. I saw them, I saw them. I saw them, I saw them. Drinking brandy at the bar. Find the private, I know where he is. He's hanging on the old barbed wire. I saw him hanging on the old barbed wire. I saw him, I saw him. 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 I saw him, I saw him.
The Fugitives, hanging on the old barbed wire. For CHLY, I'm Joe Pugh. Join me next week for part 2 of the feature.
That's our show for today. I'm Mick Sweetman, and thank you for listening. Midcoast Morning is co-hosted and produced by Jesse Woodward, with technical assistance from Arbie. Our theme music is Good Company from the Nanaimo band Venice. You can help support Midcoast Morning as a project of CHLY's news department by making a donation at chly.ca/donate.
Have a business or nonprofit? Support local journalism by sponsoring the show. Learn more by emailing sales@chly.ca.
Have a story you'd like us to cover? Email us at news@chly.ca or leave a message on our voicemail at 778-441-4543.
Midcoast Morning is funded in part by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and Heritage Canada's Local Journalism Initiative.